Leila Faraji stared out the window of her first-class seat on the train from Seoul to Busan. She was relieved she didn't have to spend the night in Seoul. That place held memories she wanted to forget. A small voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mummy, are you okay?" She turned to see her daughter, Nari, looking up at her with worried eyes. Leila pulled her into a reassuring hug. "I'm all right, sweetie. Just a little tired." As Nari drifted to sleep in her arms, Leila's thoughts wandered back to 7 years ago. She had just begun her senior year at a university in Boston when she met Park Taemin. She was studying in the library one day when he sat nearby. Every now and then, Leila would catch him glancing at her before quickly averting his eyes. Soon, Taemin started coming to the library whenever he knew she would be there. He finally summoned the courage to introduce himself and ask if they could be friends. Leila smiled and accepted. She had also begun looking forward to seeing him. It turned out Taemin was in his senior year as well, in a different department. From then on, they met often to study and take walks together. A few months later, Taemin confessed his feelings for her. Without hesitation, she jumped into his arms and agreed to be his girlfriend. That was the happiest they would be for a long time. When Leila tried to introduce Taemin to her parents, they refused to see him. Unwilling to accept an interracial relationship, Taemin decided to take her home to meet his family. The Park family ran a successful electronics business in Seoul. With Leila's minor in Korean, she would have no problem communicating with them. When they arrived at the family house, they were met at the door by Taemin's mother, Mrs. Park. "Taemin, you're home. Come in," she said stiffly. Without acknowledging Leila, she turned around and headed inside. Taemin looked at Leila, gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, and let her in. At the table sat Taemin's father and mother, Mr. and Mrs. Park, and his paternal grandmother, Grandma Park. Taemin and Leila greeted everyone, but only his grandma smiled back. The tension in the air was almost tangible. Leila glanced around. There was only one empty chair. They hadn't included a chair for her. Taemin said to his family, "This is Leila, my girlfriend I told you about. We'll need a chair for her." Mr. Park responded, "Oh, we weren't expecting you to bring a guest." His tone was calm but hostile. Taemin guided Leila to the only available seat, next to his grandmother. "I guess I'll stand then," he said. Mr. Park's face turned red with anger, and Leila wished she could disappear. Grandma Park saved the day. "Little Taemin is now a grown man. Come and hug Grandma. It's been so long since I've seen you." Taemin breathed a sigh of relief as he moved to give her a warm hug. She instructed someone to get a chair for him, and he sat between her and Leila. Taemin's grandmother had always loved him deeply, and even though she was a very traditional woman, he knew she would treat Leila amicably for his sake. During the meal, Mr. Park told Taemin that he had arranged some blind dates for him with his friends' daughters. Leila could take no more. She stood up, and Taemin stood with her. He had clearly had enough too. His father ordered him to sit back down, but Taemin replied, "If you want me to sit and watch you insult the woman I love, then I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen." He took Leila's hand and led her toward the door. His father shouted after him, "If you walk out that door, you're no longer my son." Hearing this, Mrs. Park begged him to come back, saying Leila was not worth it. Taemin turned and said, "You're my family, but so is Leila. Do with that what you will." Then they walked out the door. Leila and Taemin were both quiet on the taxi ride back. Later that night, in her hotel room, Leila was deep in thought. Both their families were against them being together. Maybe she would have preferred never meeting Taemin's family over being treated like she didn't even exist. She wasn't just mad at them. She was mad at herself for being too timid to give them a piece of her mind, especially Mr. Park. Grandma Park was all right, though. There was a knock on the door. She opened it to find Taemin. "I'm sorry about my family. I didn't expect them to go so far," he said solemnly as he stepped in. Leila sighed as she replied, "It's not your fault, Taemin, but I don't know if this is going to work." Taemin's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you breaking up with me?" "Not necessarily," she said, avoiding his gaze. "But I think we need some time apart to decide what's next." Taemin cupped her face in his hands. "My feelings are not going to change, Leila. I want to be with you." Leila's heart melted, but she stood her ground. "Then let's say I'm the one who needs time to think," she said. "I'll head back to Boston tomorrow. Let's meet after the graduation ceremony and see how we both feel by then." A whole month away, Taemin wanted to protest, but he relented, not wanting to pressure her. He gave her a light hug and said goodnight. The next day, Leila flew back to Boston on her own, and Taemin returned a few days later. The day after the graduation ceremony, they met at a nearby restaurant. Seeing Taemin again made Leila realize just how much she missed him. "How have you been?" she asked. "Apart from missing you like crazy, I've been all right," he said with a piercing gaze. Leila blushed and looked away. Taemin continued, "You said you wanted time to think. So? What did you decide?" Looking into his eyes, she said, "I know I want to be with you." Taemin breathed a sigh of relief, but Leila continued, "I also know that I don't want us to be estranged from our parents forever. I want my kids to know their grandparents." Taemin moved closer and held her hands. "Our parents will come around. They just need time. But I don't want us to lose each other while waiting for them. Leila, will you marry me?" He produced a ring box from his pocket, shocking her. Are you sure?" she stammered. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life," Taemin replied, his voice hoarse with emotion. "But aren't you supposed to return and take over your family business?" Leila asked. "If they can't accept you, then I have no place there," Taemin said firmly, and continued, "You told me earlier that you'd be working here in Boston. I've also gotten an offer with a company here. I'll stay here with you, and we can discuss moving to Seoul if things change." Tearfully, Leila nodded and stretched out her hand. Taemin placed the ring on her finger and wrapped her in a passionate embrace. Some of the nearby patrons in the restaurant had been watching and applauded at the beautiful sight. Their wedding was simple, with only a handful of friends in attendance. Neither of their parents were present, but their eyes were filled with love for each other. The first month of their marriage was blissful, but it was short-lived. The company Leila was scheduled to work at was acquired by another company, and a hiring freeze was put in place. As a result, her job offer was rescinded. This was a huge blow because she had always dreamed of working there. She started sending out job applications daily, but since most companies had already completed their hiring for the season, finding a job was not easy. Taemin was supportive during this time, helping her apply for jobs when she was too exhausted and keeping her spirits up. Then, Taemin's company went through a financial crisis. Many employees were laid off, but fortunately, Taemin kept his job. However, those who remained had to work overtime to help the company survive. This meant Taemin left early and returned late, and they saw less and less of each other. Stress and exhaustion soon crept in, and every now and then, they would argue over trivial things. Deep down, Leila felt this was all her fault. If it weren't for her, Taemin wouldn't have to bear the responsibility of supporting them both while struggling with an unfulfilling job. He could be comfortably running his family's company. One morning, Taemin received a call from a friend back in Korea, expressing condolences for the loss of his grandmother and asking why he hadn't attended the funeral. It turned out his grandmother had passed away a few days ago, but his family had not informed him. When Taemin got off the call, he simply stared into space in a daze, not uttering a word. Leila had overheard the conversation. She came over and wrapped her arms around him in a consoling hug. Finally, Taemin could not hold back the pain. He sobbed uncontrollably in her arms, mourning the loss of his beloved grandmother and feeling the sting of his family's betrayal. Leila's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She couldn't bear to see him like this. She had to do something. Later, Taemin informed her that he had requested bereavement leave to go pay his respects. He offered to take her along, but Leila insisted it would be better if he went alone. The next day, as he headed out the door, Leila kissed him deeply, as though he would be gone a long time. "Don't worry, darling," he told her, hugging her. "We'll get through this. I'll be back in a few days, and we'll be all right." Leila nodded, her eyes teary. 3 days later, she sat in their living room, most of her belongings packed into boxes. The movers would be here soon. She placed a letter on the table, along with divorce papers. All that was left was Taemin's signature. This was the only way she could think of to set him free. When all her belongings had been removed, she took one last glance at what had been their marital home for the past few months. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered, closing the door behind her. The train jolted to a stop, pulling Leila from her somber thoughts and back into reality. They had arrived in Busan. "Wake up, Nari! We're here!" she said to her daughter. Nari stirred, her eyes brightening when she saw the train had stopped. Gathering her belongings, Leila took Nari's hand and they stepped onto the platform. At the arrivals area, a familiar face was smiling and waving at them. "It's Mr. David!" Nari squealed, pointing excitedly. Leila hushed her, though she couldn't help but smile at Nari's excitement. When they reached him, David ruffled Nari's hair affectionately. David Lee, Leila's boss, was an American of Korean descent. He had built a successful consulting firm that helped South Korean companies establish subsidiaries in the States. On this occasion, he had arrived in Busan a few days before Leila to begin preliminary discussions with their client, T&L. Leila had started working for David a year after Nari was born. She had taken her daughter on a few work trips, and Nari always got along quite well with him. The consulting industry was demanding, especially for a single mother. But David had always been understanding when emergencies arose. He did his best to ensure she never had to work overtime, and in return, Leila went above and beyond in her work, determined to prove he hadn't misplaced his trust in her. Watching their interaction now, Leila couldn't shake the feeling that Nari might be missing a father figure in her life. Sometimes she almost wished she hadn't. "Leila, did you hear me?" David's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "I asked if you had a smooth trip." Leila shook off the lingering emotions and smiled. "Yes, Nari slept through most of the flight to Seoul, and the train ride was comfortable." "I'm glad to hear that," David said warmly. He led them to the car that would take them to their hotel and said, "I had your hotel switched to one with a bigger room and daycare service," he explained. "That way, Nari can play there while you're out for work." Leila brightened. "Thank you so much. You really didn't have to. I was planning to hire a babysitter." David waved off her gratitude. "It's nothing. Consider it a company benefit. With all the work you put in, this is the least I can do." Their hotel suite was spacious and elegant, with a breathtaking view from the window. Nari pressed her hands against the glass, watching the busy street below. Leila smiled, grateful to catch a break before work officially began. 2 days later, it was time for their first joint meeting with the client, T&L. Leila and David arrived at the firm and were escorted to a conference room where key executives were already waiting. After exchanging greetings, they took their seats. Mr. Kim, the CEO, welcomed them warmly, but informed them that the company's founder would be arriving shortly. Leila turned to him, puzzled. "From what I know, you've been the CEO since the company's inception 4 years ago. You mean you're not the founder?" Mr. Kim chuckled. "I just run the company. Our founder... Oh, here he is now." The room fell silent as the door opened. The executives rose in greeting, but Leila remained frozen, her breath catching in her throat. The founder was Taemin. Even after all these years, the sight of him made her heart flutter. He seemed more confident, exuding an air of authority, but the warmth in his eyes was gone. And then, as his gaze locked onto hers, emotions flickered across his face. Shock, relief, and then pain. All eyes in the room darted between Taemin and Leila. David broke the silence. "Excuse me, do you two know each other?" Taemin recovered quickly, masking his emotions. "We went to college together," he said coolly. Mr. Kim, oblivious to the charged atmosphere, beamed. "That's wonderful! It's always easier to work with familiar faces. Let's get down to business." Leila forced herself to focus as they discussed setting up T&L's U.S. subsidiary. Somehow, she managed to hold herself together, resisting the urge to flee the room. By the end of the meeting, an agreement had been reached. As the executives began filing out, Taemin walked toward her, stopping just inches away. Leila mustered a faint smile, aware of the eyes still on them, and managed to ask, "Have you been well?" Taemin's voice was filled with emotion. "What do you think?" Before she could respond, David stepped in, sensing her distress. "Apologies for the interruption, but we have to head back for a virtual meeting with our team in the U.S. Taemin nodded stiffly, then turned and walked away, while Mr. Kim happily escorted Leila and David to the exit. Back in his office, Taemin sank into his chair, his mind spinning. It was her. It was really her. After all these years, she had suddenly walked back into his life as if nothing had happened. He wanted to scream. Where had she been? Why did she leave? But more than anything, he wanted to hold her. Despite everything, he still loved her. Back at the hotel, David escorted Leila to her door. "Thank you for today," she said quietly. David hesitated before responding. "Is he Nari's father?" Leila's breath hitched. "How did you know?" David sighed. "I've never seen you so shaken, even with the toughest clients." "He certainly wasn't just your university colleague." Leila's shoulders slumped. "I didn't know he owned T&L, but I promise I won't let this affect my work." David stopped her. "It's all right. I trust you. It's not my place to ask what happened, but if you need anything, you know I'm here." Leila sensed something more than platonic concern, but she simply nodded, murmuring a quiet thank you before stepping into her room. Alone at last, her knees gave way, and she crumpled to the floor. All these years, she had convinced herself that she had done the right thing, that leaving Taemin had been for his own good, but after seeing him today, she wasn't so sure anymore. She had wanted nothing more than to run into his arms and dispel the pain in his eyes. And what about Nari? Leila had discovered she was pregnant a month after leaving Taemin. At first, she had considered going back, but in the end decided against it. She hadn't wanted him to feel trapped just because they had a child, so she had chosen to raise Nari on her own. But didn't Nari deserve to know her father? Overwhelmed by exhaustion and emotion, Leila buried her face in her hands and wept. After pulling herself together, Leila made her way downstairs to pick up Nari from the hotel daycare. The moment Nari spotted her, she squealed with delight, dashing into her arms. "Mommy! Mommy! I made so many new friends today!" she exclaimed, her laughter bubbling over. Leila felt the weight in her chest ease as she hugged her daughter tightly. "I love you, baby," she whispered. Nari placed her tiny damp hands on Leila's face and said sweetly, "I love you too, Mommy." Wanting to give Nari some fresh air after a day indoors, Leila suggested a trip to the park. Nari gasped in excitement. "Yay! Is Mr. David coming?" Leila hesitated. "I don't think so, sweetheart. He's probably busy, but I'll let him know we're there." Satisfied, Nari grabbed Leila's hand and tugged her toward the door. At the park, Nari took off running, her giggles filling the afternoon air. Leila watched her with a smile, letting herself be swept up in her daughter's joy. Meanwhile, somewhere in the park, Taemin walked along the paved pathway, his mind in turmoil. Seeing Leila again had shattered the fragile peace he had built over the years. He needed to talk to her, to demand answers. A sudden impact against his legs jolted him from his thoughts. He looked down to find a little girl clutching him for balance and staring up at him with wide, startled eyes. "I'm sorry, mister," she gasped. "I was chasing a butterfly." Taemin crouched, steadying her and smiling despite himself. "Did you catch it?" She pouted and looked down sadly. "No." He patted her head gently. "Don't worry, next time you will." She smiled at him then, a strangely familiar smile. Then a voice called out, "Nari!" His heart stopped. It was Leila. She came rushing toward them, her face filled with worry, and froze when she saw him. They just stared at each other, neither speaking. Then Nari spoke. "I'm sorry for running too fast, Mommy. I almost fell, but this nice man helped me." Leila's heart pounded. "Thank you," she whispered. Taemin flinched. "Mommy?" His gaze dropped back to Nari, studying her intently. "Her name is Nari?" he asked Leila in disbelief. Leila remained silent, tightening her grip on Nari. Nari was the name they had agreed to call their daughter if they had one. David's voice cut through the silence. "What a surprise to see you here, Mr. Park." He walked up to them and said to Leila, "I got your message. I came to escort you and Nari back." Taemin's eyes darkened. "And who are you to them?" David met his gaze, unfazed. "I don't believe I owe you an explanation." Then David pulled Leila aside and whispered, "If it helps, I can say I'm her father." Leila shook her head. "Thank you. But this is between me and him." David hesitated before nodding in understanding. Leila then turned to Nari. "Sweetheart, can you wait with Mr. David for a little while?" Nari looked worried. "Are you okay, Mommy?" Leila forced a smile. "Yes, love. I just need to talk to this nice mister." Nari hesitantly nodded and left with David. Leila turned back to Taemin, her heart pounding as she met his intense gaze. Taemin's voice was raw when he finally spoke. "She's mine, isn't she?" Leila had spent years avoiding this moment, but now there was nowhere to run. Finally, she nodded. "Yes." Taemin staggered back at the revelation. Nari was his daughter. He was a father. Leila and Taemin stood alone in the park, Taemin still reeling from the realization that he had a daughter. Pain flickered in his eyes as he stared at Leila. "How could you just leave, Leila? Why did you? And with our child?" Leila swallowed hard. "I thought it was best." "Best for who?" he shot back. "Do you have any idea what I went through trying to find you? I searched everywhere, asked everyone. No one would tell me. You even told the police you didn't want to be found." She turned away, choking down tears. "I thought your life was a mess because of me. I couldn't stand to see you in pain." Taemin exhaled, trying not to lose his cool. "You caused me more pain by leaving than anything else ever could. Do you know what it felt like to come home and find you gone? To read your letter saying you hoped I'd find happiness without you? How could I be happy without you?" Guilt crashed over Leila. She had caused the very pain she was trying to save him from. He took a step closer. "What hurt me even more, Leila, is that you didn't trust me. You didn't trust that you or our child were important enough for me to fight for. Did you really think I valued my comfort more than I loved you?" His voice was laced with frustration and sorrow. Leila sobbed softly. "I'm sorry. You have every right to be angry. I just didn't know what else to do." "Of course I'm angry," Taemin admitted. "Angry that I've lost so many years with my daughter." Then, he gently pulled her into his arms. "But what hurts the most is knowing you've had to do this alone. I'm sorry I wasn't there, and I'm sorry I didn't see the signs earlier." Leila shook her head. "No, it wasn't your fault. I was young and stupid. Because of me, Nari doesn't know her father," she said, trembling in his arms. She had missed this, the warmth and safety of his embrace. Taemin lifted a hand, gently wiping away her tears. Then, slowly, he leaned in, his lips brushing the tears from her cheek, before hovering just above her lips. Leila didn't move, but her eyes never left his. His lips met hers briefly in a soft, tentative kiss. Then, Leila stepped back abruptly. "It looks like it might rain. I should take Nari back." It took all of Taemin's willpower to let go. He asked her how long she would be in Busan, and she said for at least one more week as they finalized the contracts. Then, he said, "I need you to promise me you won't disappear this time and that you'll let me see Nari." She nodded slowly. "I promise. As for Nari, I'll find a chance to talk to her and let you know." He pulled out a card from his pocket. "This is my personal number. Call me." He was trusting her to keep her word. "I will," she said as she took it and ran back down the pathway, leaving Taemin staring after her. That night, as Leila tucked Nari into bed, the little girl looked up at her with curious eyes. "Mommy, was that man my daddy?" Leila froze, her heart pounding. "Why would you ask that, baby?" Nari tilted her head. "Because you looked at him in a special way." Taking a steadying breath, she said, "Yes, sweetheart, that was your daddy." Nari's eyes widened, then she hesitated. Then why wasn't he here before? Leila held back tears as she stroked her daughter's curly hair. "Because Mommy made a mistake, and Daddy didn't know where to find us." Nari smiled up at her sweetly. "It's okay, Mommy. Everyone makes mistakes." Leila kissed her cheek. "Thank you, baby. Would you like to meet him again?" "Yes, can I?" Leila nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, I'll let him know." Leila made the call, and Taemin canceled all his afternoon appointments for the next day. When he arrived at the hotel, he had barely knocked before the door swung open, and Leila stood there with Nari peeking from behind her. "Hi, Daddy," Nari said in a whisper. Taemin felt his heart shatter and piece itself back together. He crouched down, arms open. "Hi, Nari." She took a hesitant step, then another, until she was in his arms. He held her like something sacred, like something he'd dreamed of for too long. "Do you want to play with me?" her small voice said. Taemin chuckled softly. "Of course! What are we playing?" The day passed in a blur of laughter and games. Leila watched them, her heart aching. She had been so wrong. When night fell, Taemin stood to leave, but Nari gripped his hand. "Can you stay, Daddy? Or just read me a bedtime story before you leave? And can Mommy join us?" It felt like her tiny hand was holding his heart. How could he refuse? They both turned to Leila for approval. She nodded, and Nari jumped with delight. As Nari lay in bed with Leila and Taemin on either side, Taemin read her a story from her favorite book. Soon, she fell asleep, but her hand clutched Taemin's fingers tightly, and she wouldn't let go. Afraid to wake her up, he and Leila decided to wait until Nari's grip loosened before he left. They had no idea when they both fell asleep. In the morning, Taemin opened his eyes to find Nari still asleep, and next to her, Leila. For a long time he didn't move, afraid that if he did, this moment would vanish like another lost dream. Then Leila opened her eyes to find him staring at her. How long had it been since she had seen that look? Too long. Seeing that Leila was up, Taemin got up, kissed Nari's forehead, and headed home to prepare for work. He stopped by often that week to play with Nari, but didn't speak much with Leila. In reality, his heart burned to tell her how he felt, but he didn't want to push her. She needed to come back to him willingly. Then, he could be certain she wouldn't leave him again. Soon, the end of the week arrived, and all contracts with T and L had been signed. It was time for Leila to return to the US. That evening, when Taemin visited, he stayed longer to put Nari to bed. When she was asleep, he got up to leave. As he was almost out the door, Leila asked, "Will we see you after we leave?" Then she turned away shyly and added, "Nari might ask." Taemin was done with this. "Can you stop using Nari as an excuse? Do you want to see me?" Leila stammered, I... Taemin held her by the shoulders. "Do you still love me, Leila? If you tell me you don't, I'll just focus on being a good father to Nari and never mention this again. But if you do, then you should know that I love you with every fiber of my being. I always have, and I always will." Tears stung Leila's eyes. But how could you ever forgive me? I don't deserve your love." "That's not what I asked, Leila." He let out a tired sigh, then said, "Do you know what T and L means?" Leila thought for a moment, then her eyes widened. Could it be? Taemin nodded. "That's right. It stands for Taemin and Leila. I never went back to run my family's business. I built T and L to prove to myself that you and I could thrive without them. This company is proof that I've been waiting for you. So tell me, Leila, do you love me?" Leila couldn't believe it. All these years, she had thought he would hate her. And here he was, offering her his heart again. Yes, he was still her Taemin. She rushed into his arms, clinging to him tightly. "Yes, Taemin, I love you. I've never stopped loving you," she said through tear-filled eyes. He cupped her face in his hands. "Then that's all that matters." He kissed her then, not tentatively, but passionately, and this time, she kissed him back. The kiss held years of longing, pain, and sleepless nights, leaving no doubt about how much they had missed each other. When they pulled apart, Leila said, "I don't want you to leave, and not just because of Nari." Taemin smiled as he stroked her hair. "Then I won't leave." Leila looked at him, puzzled, and he said, "I'll move to the US as soon as I can. Most meetings can be virtual anyway, and if they ever really need me here, I can always fly back." Leila thought for a while, then said firmly, "No, I'll move here." Taemin was surprised. "But what about your job? You've finally become a partner at your firm. I can't ask you to give that up." Leila smiled lovingly. I'll work something out with David. We needed an on-site partner anyway. Then he wouldn't need to travel back and forth so often. It's always been you making compromises for me. Now it's my turn. I'll stay with you, and we can discuss moving to the US if things change. Taemin's heart melted. He had told her something similar years ago when he proposed. As you wish, Mrs. Park, he whispered into her ear. Leila blushed. Well, technically, we're not married anymore. Taemin chuckled. I never signed those divorce papers, silly. So technically, we've been married this whole time. Leila laughed as she hugged him. Oh, how she loved this man. For the first time, Taemin felt that he truly had his wife back. The next morning, Leila had a conversation with David and explained her desire to stay in Busan, only traveling to the US office when necessary. It took some convincing, but David finally asked, Is this really what you want? Leila nodded firmly, and he said, Very well. I'll discuss it with our other partners. Leila thanked him and headed out, eager to tell Taemin the news. As David watched her leave, his heart ached, but he was truly happy for her. Perhaps this was for the best. He could finally move on. When Leila arrived back at the hotel, Taemin was waiting with Nari to take them both to his place. Nari jumped up excitedly when she saw her. Mommy, can we really stay with Daddy forever? Leila looked at Taemin, whose broad smile mirrored hers. Then she said to Nari, Yes, baby, forever. Taemin picked Nari up and took Leila's hand as he said, Let's go home. Many things remained uncertain. She and Nari would have to adjust to their new life, and there were still bridges to mend with their parents. But as Leila looked at Taemin, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. As long as they had each other, they would be all right. Leila opened her eyes as sunlight spilled through the bedroom window. She turned to find Taemin awake, gazing at her lovingly. Good morning, he murmured, pressing a tender kiss to her cheek. She smiled softly. It had always been Taemin's habit to get up early, but since they reunited 2 months ago, he often lingered in bed. As if afraid she might disappear, she understood. It would take time to reassure him that she was here to stay. Snuggling closer, she wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head on his chest. Taemin chuckled. If you hold me like this, how am I supposed to get up? Leila playfully pushed him aside and got up to check on their daughter, Nari. In the adjacent room, Nari slept soundly. For the first few weeks, she had refused to sleep without clutching Taemin's hand, but now she slept comfortably on her own. Leila gently woke her and helped her get dressed. By the time they were done, Taemin had made a light breakfast, and they joined him in the dining area. Good morning, Daddy, Nari called, running to him. Taemin lifted her effortlessly and spun her around. Good morning, my princess, he said, setting her down with a smile. Leila cherished mornings like this. Taemin had hired a CEO to oversee his company, T&L. When meetings were necessary, he scheduled them strategically, so he had most weekdays free to spend with Leila and Nari. Meanwhile, Leila worked mostly remotely, traveling only once in a while to see clients. As they ate, Taemin's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening before he excused himself. When he returned, his demeanor was tense. Noticing this, Nari asked, Daddy, are you okay? Some of his tension eased as he scooped her onto his lap. Yes, princess, Daddy's fine. She studied him skeptically. Sensing she wasn't convinced, he smiled. I know a new game we can play after breakfast. Nari nodded enthusiastically and returned to her meal, satisfied with the distraction. But Leila wasn't fooled. That evening, after finishing a call with her team in the US, Leila found Taemin standing by the window, lost in thought. She embraced him from behind, resting her head against his back. Talk to me, Taemin. We promised to be honest with each other. He sighed, turning to take her hand. My mom's 60th birthday is in 2 weeks. She wants me to come home. Leila studied him. You don't want to go? He looked away. The past few years, I've barely spoken to them. Now that you and Nari are finally settling in, I don't want them causing trouble for you. Leila gave him an affectionate smile. I'm not the spineless girl I was back then. Besides, it might go better than you think. What do you mean? Taemin asked, puzzled. Leila exhaled. You know I told you how my parents reacted when they found out I was pregnant with Nari. They were sorry that they had isolated me to the extent that I thought I had to do it on my own. It took some time, but we finally made up. If your parents are reaching out, then maybe you should give them a chance. He considered her words. If I go, will you and Nari be all right? Leila scoffed. We're not going to disappear, honey. But you don't have to worry. We'll come with you. He searched her face and saw that she was serious. Thank you, he whispered, wrapping his arms around her. 2 weeks later, they flew to Seoul. Their first stop was Grandma Park's grave, where Taemin laid fresh flowers. He still missed her deeply. Leila had only met her once, but knew she was a kind woman. She wished she'd had the chance to know her better. Arriving at the Park residence, Taemin took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. When Mrs. Park opened the door, she gasped, Taemin, you actually came! Then her gaze landed on Leila, who braced herself for hostility. But instead, Mrs. Park stepped forward. Leila, you're all right. She turned to Taemin. You finally found her. Leila was stunned, but there was no malice in the woman's tone. Then Mrs. Park noticed Nari and froze. Is she? Taemin nodded. This is our daughter, Nari. Happy birthday, Granny, Nari said softly. Daddy said it's your birthday. A sob escaped Mrs. Park as she knelt and pulled Nari into a hug. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Grandma is here. Grandma is sorry. Nari tilted her head in confusion. Leila gently stroked her daughter's hair and explained, Grandma is sad because she missed your birthdays. Nari brightened. That's okay, Grandma. I have many more birthdays. Mr. Park had joined them, watching quietly. When Nari spotted him, she smiled. Are you my grandpa? A flicker of emotion crossed his face, and he nodded, offering a weak smile. Mrs. Park invited them inside, but dinner was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. Even Nari sensed it, her gaze shifting between her parents and grandparents. When it was time for them to leave, Mrs. Park said, Can you please stay for just tonight? Taemin hesitated, but at Leila's gentle nudge, he relented. Later that night, unable to sleep, Leila went downstairs for water. She found Mrs. Park sitting alone in the dimly lit living room. Noticing her, Mrs. Park motioned for her to come sit. Taemin looks happy, Mrs. Park said. You know, he never stays here. He only comes to town for business or to visit his grandma's grave. He was a wreck when you left. It hurt so much to see him like that. We were so wrong, Leila. I'm so sorry. Tears slipped down her face. Leila regarded the woman before her and realized that they had both made mistakes. Thinking they knew what was best for Taemin, she reached out, embracing Mrs. Park gently. It wasn't just your fault. I made mistakes too, but everything's fine now. Mrs. Park nodded, smiling weakly. Leila got her glass of water and returned to bed, slipping beneath the covers beside Taemin and Nari. The warmth of her family lulled her into a peaceful sleep. The next morning, Taemin rose early, as was his habit. As a teenager, he had often retreated to the backyard, finding solace in its quiet expanse. He stepped outside, the crisp morning air greeting him, and saw his father standing under the soft glow of the rising sun. I knew you'd come here, Mr. Park said, his voice calm but hoarse. Taemin hesitated as a flood of emotions welled up in his chest. He had resented his father for so long, yet standing here now, he couldn't find any words to say. Mr. Park stepped closer, placing a firm but gentle hand on Taemin's shoulder. Son, he said, I'm sorry. Taemin stiffened. Not once in all his years had his father apologized to him. Mr. Park continued, I caused you to be separated from your wife and child for so long, and I'm truly sorry. Before Taemin could react, he found himself pulled into his father's strong hug. Tears welled in his eyes as he realized he couldn't remember the last time his father had hugged him. It's all right, father, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. It's all right now. Taemin, Leila, and Nari stayed a few more days at the Park family home, and soon, smiles replaced wary glances, laughter filled the air, and Nari, with her infectious joy, effortlessly bridged the gaps between them all. When they finally left, they promised to return whenever they were in town. Months later, the U.S. subsidiary of T&L was finally ready to launch. Taemin, Leila, and Nari traveled to the States for the opening ceremony. Their first stop was Leila's parents' home. This meeting was easier. Leila had already mended ties with them, and they had played a large role in raising Nari. More importantly, they had already come to terms with meeting Taemin. When they arrived, Mr. and Mrs. Faraji opened the door with warm smiles. Nari excitedly rushed into their embrace. Inside, As they sat down for dinner, Taemin could feel the tension in the air. The familiar expressions of guilt mirrored what he had seen on his own parents' faces. He decided to make it easy for them. "Thank you," he said, "for being there for Leila and Nari all these years." Mrs. Faraji exhaled, her gaze softening. "Leila is our daughter. Nari is our grandchild. It was the least we could do. Besides, if we hadn't been so stubborn back then, maybe—" Taemin shook his head gently, stopping her. "It's all right. We're together now, and that's all that matters." Mr. and Mrs. Faraji nodded, satisfied. Leila smiled sweetly at Taemin, gratitude shining in her eyes. The rest of the evening passed peacefully, filled with stories and laughter. They spent the night in the Faraji home, as the weight of the past finally started to lift. A few days later, at the opening ceremony, Taemin stood on stage, addressing the gathered crowd. As he spoke, his eyes instinctively found the front row, where Leila and Nari sat. On one side were his parents, on the other, Leila's parents. His gaze locked with Leila's, and he knew they were thinking the same thing. For the first time, their families were together, not just in the same room, but celebrating a shared joy. They had done it. That night, back at the Faraji home, they tucked Nari into bed, then retreated to their own room, wrapped in each other's warmth. They lay in bed in companionable silence. Leila pressed her face against Taemin's chest, breathing him in. "I love you, Taemin," she whispered. His arms tightened around her. "I love you too, Leila." His voice was hoarse with emotion, his heart so full he thought it might burst. This woman, Leila, was his wife, his love, his home. After a brief pause, he suddenly chuckled, his voice turning sly. "Leila, I think Nari needs a sibling." Leila gasped before laughter bubbled from her lips. She barely had time to protest before he pulled her into a deep kiss and dimmed the lights.